I came in 1955 into the U.S. as a young boy of 11 years old, really for reasons unbeknownst to me and without my ability then to understand why I was uprooted from my home in Crete, on the island of Crete, to come to America. Generally speaking, I knew that we were coming to a better life as orphans of my mom, because my dad had died just after the war in 1948. And she decided to send us to America. I will just tell a little bit of that trip, which was quite really an immigrant story. And it is part of the story of the immigrant, because my story is really not much different than every immigrant's story who comes into this country and faces hardships. So we left when my dad passed away in 1948. My mom knew, of course, that we were born to a U.S. citizen. My dad had lived in the United States for 39 years and was a citizen. And she knew that we had the right to come to America. We were, in fact, U.S. citizens. So what to do? She got on a bus. She went to Chania and on to Athens. And she went to the American embassy and she knocked on the door. She wanted to see the ambassador. And they told her to wait. And sure enough, she was able to see the ambassador, and she said, I want my children to come to America, to go to America, because they have the right to. So he explained to her that, yes, in fact, your children can go to America because they're U.S. citizens, but if you wanted to something different, you can get $100 a month from the U.S. government until your youngest, my sister Georgia, at that time 2 years old, it reaches to be 18. So why don't you go home, the ambassador said, and come back after a few days and give me your decision, and we'll do whatever you want. So she turns around and she says, well, I'll go around the block and I'll be back in 10 minutes. So sure enough, she went back in 10 minutes. She says, my decision is to have my children go to America. Her two daughters at that time were, one was 13 and one was 12. And in her own wisdom, she decided, how could I send my daughter to America, to a strange land, all alone? Well, I got it. I'm going to marry her off. And she made the arrangements, and she found the prospects, of course, were lined up because of their ticket to America. So she found a husband for her, and she married her off. He was 27 and she was 13. And she came to America by ship at that time. And she landed in New York, and my mother had arranged for her to be met by someone, a Cretan man. And she got off the boat, and she was on to the dock, etc. And she waited, and she waited for several hours, 3 hours. And a little girl now sitting in her suitcase, 13 years old, and waiting for this person to meet her. And nobody showed up. And someone approached her, and by the accent she could tell it was a Cretan. And says, what are you doing here, my child? So my sister said, well, I'm here to meet someone. He was supposed to meet me by arrangement of my mother, etc. Well, who is he? What's his name? So she gave the man's name. She says, oh, my child, we buried him 3 days ago. And this is really an immigrant story. This is what most of us go through, more or less. Some more difficult, some less difficult. But the story of hardship is the immigrant story. What inspired me to join this organization? And there's a tie. the fellow that helped her out was a Butsikaki from New York. And the family continues to be in New York. Andrea Butsikaki is at this convention today. He took her to his home, and the next day he took her to the furriers in New York, and she got a job, and on, and a year later her husband came. But what inspired me is that there was a community, and is a community, of Cretans, of our own people, that manages to help each other, even unintentionally sometimes. They just naturally have the instinct of helping each other. I know for myself, if I hear that a young person or an older person or a sick person is here from Crete, it automatically attracts me and it drives me to go and meet this person, to see what they need, how they're doing, etc. And that sense of community is what inspired me to join this organization, because the PAA, from the very, very beginning, was our community of Cretans. We started because we needed each other. We really needed each other to survive. And today it has changed. We don't need each other to survive, but we need to keep our identity and our tradition and so on. So that's really what inspired me to join this organization. Would I have ever thought to be a leader of the organization, of a president of the organization? Well, not really, but I was, in 1967, as a graduate from school in Washington, D.C., one of my mentors was a fellow by the name of Manoli Tsurunis. He was a past president, a former president of the PAA, and a very, very incredible person for me. He was a mentor. He didn't even know it, but he was a mentor to me. I would watch him and I would follow him, and I would try, frankly, to emulate him. And he was quite a leader, a great leader, I would say. One of our great presidents. And through watching him, etc., I said, well, you know what? Maybe I can also. And I got involved more and more into the organization. And the more I got involved over the years, the more bonded I felt with our community, with our people, and the more I wanted to be part of this organization. And one thing led to another, I guess, and it wasn't by design, it just happened. So that's the story of my designs on the presidency of the PAA. I want to say that perhaps what makes me most proud about our community generally, our Cretan community, and more specifically about our organization, are several things. First, I'm really proud of our community because I know the immigrant story. I know the difficulty that they all encountered when they came, and they were the shoeshine boys of Boston, and the railroad workers of the Midwest, and the miners of the West. I've read so many stories about these people, and how many hardships and how many lives were lost, and how many hardships they incurred. So little by little, they established themselves, either the little candy stores or little flower shops or whatever throughout the country, and they established themselves. And they were driven to get their kids educated, to get the next generation educated. And they did. And they did. And today we are one of the most, if not the most, educated minority in this country. Can you imagine that? From the utter poverty of Crete to extreme hardships, impossible hardships in the United States, to educating their kids to becoming lawyers and doctors and politicians. That's really such a source of pride for me. And by extension, I'm so proud of our organization, because our organization in every step mirrored our community in the United States. Just mirrored it, every aspect of it. My dad came through Ellis Island, and he was out in Chicago and out in the West, and he did those menial jobs, those real hard jobs that, because of the legal structure at the time, there was no protection from him. When the Rockefeller machines and the various other industrialists decided to take advantage of these poor folk, they really took advantage of them. But they endured, and they formed little groups, and these little groups became a little community, and they formed little chapters, and then those chapters formed what we now call the PAA. So isn't that an incredible source of pride? It really makes me proud of that. During my presidency, I had the incredible satisfaction of being surrounded by a group of people that just simply worked with their heart. And they did such much work for this organization that it only inspired me, and it drove me to work harder and harder every day. That is really incredible. And I can mention a lot of people, but generally speaking, somebody took on the task. We obviously had an agenda and had a program, and we wanted basically to organize ourselves, our organization from within, and then we wanted to reach out to our chapters and communicate. Those were some of the foundations of my presidency. And I had my wonderful friend and buddy Helen Rainey, for example, who took on the task of standardizing our procedures and assembling manuals, operating manuals for every office and for every discipline within our organization. And our organization evolved over the years, over the last 85 years, into a real complex organization. And you can no longer go by word of mouth and teach the next generation of officers of the organization. You have to put things in writing so that there's something to go on, so that you don't reinvent the wheel at each turn. So we put those procedures down, and hopefully this will help in our future when new generation of officers and leaders of our group follow these procedures and add to them. And then the other aspect concerning our communication, we tried to go to all the districts, assemble as many chapters of each district as we could, and organize leadership conferences to come down with ideas, to discuss among ourselves what are our problems, what are the issues that are affecting us, where are we going, how do we get there, and come up and with a set of ideas, put them down with the hope that they will be distributed throughout the country, throughout our 80 chapters, throughout the United States, so that somebody will pick up some ideas, all in the hope of perpetuating the existence of this wonderful organization and continuing to improve and build its membership and its relevancy. And in my opinion, this organization is just as relevant today as it was in 1929 when it was first legally formed. Why? For different reasons, but just as relevant. In 1929, We needed each other. They needed each other to survive. Today, we need to keep our identity. We need to keep our traditions. We need to keep our language, our religion, our knowledge and our history about our wonderful island of Crete. So we are really just as relevant. And this organization is continuing to perpetuate that relevancy that we're talking about. And it has to do a little bit with my vision, what the future holds. I really believe that not only we have a group of people who are dedicated to this idea of identity with our homeland Crete, its traditions, its language, its customs, and everything else. But to add to that, we have individuals with the financial ability to continue. So all of a sudden, we have new programs and ideas and visions, but we also have money to back them, which is a wonderful thing. And I see that as part of our future. I see another 80 years of wonderful success in this organization. There's no reason that we should stop. There is no reason why we should fizzle out. There's absolutely no reason. We have every bit of reason today, as we did 80 years ago, and I believe that we will have so 80 years from now. My presidency has been a wonderful time of my life, a very significant time of my life. And like I said, first and foremost, because I was surrounded by a wonderful group of people. And I must emphasize here, and it was partly by design, that we had no less than 8 women on our board. And boy, were they the epitome of efficiency and of hard work and of dedication. And that is a trend, by the way. That is a trend that the women of Cretan descent, whereas 80 years ago, they were the homemakers, raising their kids, struggling in their home. Today, they're taking leadership positions. And that's the way it should be. And I look forward, as part of my vision, in the not too near future, to see one of our ladies lead this organization as its president. I'm married to a wonderful woman who is not of Cretan descent. But this organization is so contagious, for lack of a better word, that she has become more of a Cretan than a lot of the Cretans by blood that I know. One of the wonderful times during my presidency was the involvement and the help that I got from my wife, Rima. She was a person of her own. She wasn't just the president's wife. She was on the board. She was heading the scholarship. She worked very, very hard. A lot of times she would oppose me on the board, but that's great. That's good. She made me feel even better about our organization because of her involvement and her encouragement. I'm very thankful for our organization. I took a little bit of a hiatus after my presidency. I'm now getting excited again to come back and be re-involved again, as I think we all have that responsibility to continue this wonderful community that we call the PAA. Thank you.